Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for the Turbine Labs Sales Enablement webinar series. My name is Lee Fatzinger, founder and CEO of Turbine Labs, and I am fortunate to be joined today by Jim Farnsworth, who's the EVP of Sykes. They are the world's leading customer engagement, one of the world's largest. Now we're going to say this, Jim. The one of the world's most largest, best customer experience management companies. They help companies around the world engage their customers with digital marketing, direct engagement services, and intelligent automation. Thanks so much for joining me, Jim, on my botched introduction of you, which I had completely laid out before the call.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So Sykes is based in Tampa, but you're also in Denver, just a few miles away from me in downtown Denver. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm actually in my office today. I'm one of about 6 people that came into the office. So physical distancing is not a problem for us today.
That's great. Well, tell us a little bit about Sykes before we get into the presentation.
Sure. Sykes, as you mentioned, based in Tampa, Florida. We're a publicly held company listed on the NASDAQ. The symbol is SYKE. We've been around for over 40 years, started originally in North Carolina, and then our founder, John Sykes, moved the company to Tampa. We're the only player in the business process outsourcing space that has the family name on top of the building and as the name of the company. And as a result, that makes all of us members of the Sykes family, upholding the values that John started of strength, of performance, of integrity. And so we have physical contact centers, bricks and mortar, a virtual at-home agent operation, a digital marketing organization, and a significant digital services group based all over the world or set all over the world.
Great.
About 55,000 employees.
Okay, of 50,000 employees. So now I knew this about you. When was the last time that you were on an airplane?
March 11th was the last time I was on an airplane.
March 11th. Now, prior to that, you were on a lot of airplanes, closing deals for Sykes. Is that right?
That is, yeah. 200,000 plus miles flown last year.
Wow. All right. Well, at least what the airlines are saying is they're holding our statuses steady for the coming year. I got that email. I'm certain that you got that email.
Yeah. Yep.
That's great. Well, listen. So let's dive right in. The title of our webinar today is "How to Prepare and Motivate Your Sales Team for a Second Half of 2020." It's something everyone is thinking about, as we're really just about 3.5 months into the world changing in terms of how commerce is conducted, and of course sales is and business development, both on the enterprise side and B2C obviously is dramatically changed over the last quarter. I want to spend just a couple of minutes going through a couple of components about Turbine Labs. We are proud this week to have our marketing team launch a new turbinelabs.com and would encourage everyone to go take a look at it. We start off the site by stating, you are now the most well-informed person in the room. We thought we were extraordinarily clever by having this phrase on our site, and then we realized no one's in room except for Jim Farnsworth with 5 other people on a 20,000 square foot space. And so now we want to make sure that you out there are the most informed person on the Zoom. So Turbine Labs is an intelligence provider. We use a combination of natural language processing, kind of AI, as well as full-time staff journalists, most of whom are based here in Denver, Colorado, to deliver intelligence to decision makers, lobbyists, politicians, and salespeople. And we're really focused on those who demand an intelligence edge in their interactions, and that's much of what we're going to be talking about today. But the process of how Turbine Labs works is very simple. We bring in a question or a request from one of our subscribers, our NLP enriches and brings in information from dozens, hundreds of thousands of sources, including news sources as well as social media, filters the wheat from the chaff, and we have journalists validate the information so that it can be delivered to our subscriber, and all this happens in less than 3 hours. So a little bit of an introduction on how Turbine Labs works. One of the things I wanted to start with, Jim, and this is something that's just kind of outer worldly when you think about the amount of information that's out there today, and what was created as a result of COVID-19 and coronavirus. So Turbine Labs started tracking articles and social posts relatively early in the in the dialogue around late February, and since the beginning of March, over 6 million articles and 544 million social posts have been published related to the topic of COVID-19. Absolutely staggering amount of content that is north of about 15 billion words of text. Now, obviously, that conversation is vast across the topics that it's related to. But if you think about how far-reaching COVID-19 was and these billions of words of text, there are, if you're a restaurant company, within the conversation about COVID-19 or coronavirus is conversation about my restaurant's not open. If you are a wireless phone carrier and you are giving incentives or programs to customers who've been adversely impacted by the economic fallout of COVID-19, your brand is within these 15 billion words of text. We did a little calculation and we determined that if you wanted to actually read all of this text, it would take a team of 2,500 people working 12-hour shifts per day, 45 days to consume all of this content. Just a real staggering number in terms of volume that we've really never seen before, in fact, in the history of the printed word in such a short period of time. And again, as I said, brands and community organizations and politicians and obviously healthcare providers and healthcare workers are all mixed into this giant bucket of coverage. And so now we got to figure out how to make use of it, specifically for how we work to reopen and start selling again, as it were. So there's my little story on Turbine Labs. Now I want to dive right in, Jim, to talking about the sales environment in COVID-19. And so, you know, it's interesting to see that this was not an event that came as the economy was slowing. By all measures, really, the economy was booming along and had been for 12 years. I think we were in the midst of the longest economic expansion in at least decades, if not in history. And so that created an environment where there was sort of, you know, a contest of wills between buyers and sellers, where there's a lot of demand and there's a lot of people that are willing to sell. But I want to sort of get your sense, you know, after such an expansion, what does the environment look like now? What do you see happening?
I think, Lee, the biggest fundamental shift that we've seen both throughout the last 3 months and we anticipate seeing going forward, there's really two big ones. And I'm sure there's more than that, but two that are very consequential for us. One is the way we do it. My business is very relationship oriented, and our buyers want to see our environment. They want to see our locations. They want to be able to meet the people that are going to be talking with or reviewing or servicing their customers. And as you mentioned, when the airline shut down, or when you can't have a physical presence in a service delivery location, you have to come up with a new way to do it. So for example, we've developed a virtual site tour process so that we can mix both pre-recorded content and a live environment using technology so that people can visit our locations without having to physically go there and get the same experience is one. The way we diagnose their needs, the way we understand their needs is different. We have to be prepared to be a little more sensitive to the conditions that the business operates in. And so you treat a retailer differently than you might treat a technology company. And the old way of sort of show up and throw up and just present who we are and tell them what our services and products are is no longer relevant. They now need to be, we need to be much more understanding of their needs and much more aware of the environment that they're operating in. The second big shift that's happened in selling is the confidence level of the buyer is not static. We saw at the beginning of this, everything we had in the pipeline and we were working on kind of came to it didn't really come to a halt, but it came to a delay where they'd say, let's slow down for 60 days to see what happens. And then they picked it back up again. And then about a month in, we saw that our leads were starting to come back in and we were getting a lot of opportunities enter our flow. And then a month later, so 2 months into this, we all of a sudden saw them sit on their hands again. And they said, well, we're not sure what's going on. We're waiting for more information. So we're not going to do anything yet. And now entering, after 3 months, we're entering the fourth month, we're starting to see it heat up again. So the ebb and flow of buyer behavior is very different. And what may feel like a hot prospect today could a week from now slow down because they're nervous about something they read or something they heard or the graphic on CNBC that shows cases going up in certain parts of the country. So really that the fickleness of buyers is something I think we're going to be living with for a while.
Well, I think that's a very interesting framing as fickleness of buyers that really we haven't seen, that either someone in an expanding economy was intent on buying, especially for B2B services or high ticket services like intelligent automation, digital marketing, things like that. And so in terms of the steps that you see the sales process going through, have you added fickleness as a category yet?
I don't think by name we have, but
because I think it's an important attribute of the sales process that may not have been there so prevalently before, or if it was, it almost appeared as an excuse from a salesperson rather than a direct outcome of the external circumstances.
Right. It's certainly relevant. The even among our embedded base clients to whom we are selling new services or working on new opportunities, people who we know well and we know their personality and their behavior, they might be confident one day and ready to go and really moving along, and then a week later again they'll come back and say, well, I think we're going to wait, or let's sit tight for a bit and see what this means or that means.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting to talk about existing accounts. I think one of the other interesting things is the pandemic has certainly interrupted the linearity, if you will, of execution on a sales process. So in this area, where you're sort of talking about kind of this bobbing back and forth of, we don't really know what's going to happen with the economy. We don't know if people are going to be back to work. Are you, or do you see your peers having to go back to square one and in many ways redefine the needs of the buyer, even if you had been relatively far along in the process prior to March of 2020?
It depends. For the most part, I think we do. In our industry, we do, because so many things have changed. We sell marketing services, which are non-people oriented, they're digital. We sell a whole suite of digital capabilities and intelligence and automation, which aren't necessarily dependent on people. But the core of our business is still people serving other people. And we have found customers say, this has altered my geographic strategy. It's altered my balance between people and technology. It's altering my balance between physical work, bricks and mortar locations versus virtual workers. Um, all of that, which we could have been working on March 10th, when they said, well, let's slow down and put this on hold. I'm thinking of one prospect in particular who pretty much told us, let's wait until July and we'll talk again. We cannot possibly pick it up where we left it off because
Right.
their
That's
business,
different business.
that's right. Their business is different. Their risk is different. The unknown of, are we going to be able to fill 50% of our capacity, or do we have to or can we fill 100% of our capacity as long as we can spread people out? The rules are different. And what's, I think, the biggest challenge is everything's still emerging. We still just don't know yet. And until there's confidence greater than the study of the moment, I think you're still going to have to diagnose it from the beginning, just as though you have a new world and a new prospect.
Yeah. So now, you are leading a team of global salespeople, and you've got this inconsistency in terms of responses. Really, a playbook that hasn't been written yet. We're writing it as we go along. And then you also have a dramatic change in behaviors. One of the things that we said to our team when we were going to remote working is, well, we're not going to be on a lot of airplanes, or we're not going to be at, Ocean Prime in New York City or Washington, D.C., building relationships with our customers. We're not going to be at networking events, shaking hands and discussing value propositions. How should salespeople be spending their time right now with that level of uncertainty that we've seen? We're now a quarter into this, not financial quarter, but we're overlapping and now into 2 quarters, as you said, into this. How are you recommending that your teams spend their time right now?
We've been focusing our team on continuing to build relationships and continue to cultivate the relationships that they've started that are relatively new, less in a less sales oriented fashion. So we've been wanting to have discussions with prospects about their business in general, and what are they seeing, and what are they facing, and how have their goals and objectives changed, and have conversations less about, let's talk about our products and services, and in general, let's talk about business so we can maintain a dialogue and still be in touch with each other. And that's how we're encouraging them to do the upfront. And by the way, we're still closing deals. I mean, we've certainly seen the ebb and flow, as I mentioned before, but we've also signed, we signed something new last week. And we expect to sign 1 or 2 things this week. Which for us is, these are large, complex deals. So we're
Right.
we're very encouraged by that. But at the same time, you're absolutely right. With the time that our team has not been spending on planes and in site visits, we've taken advantage of not only encouraging them to maintain the relationships and the dialogue, virtual coffee meetings, some of them I'm sure doing virtual happy hours, but also re-educating themselves on our products and services, going deeper, re-educating themselves on the needs of our prospects, and the events and how they shape a particular industry. So it's a combination of helping them continue to cultivate and build relationships, and also to build and develop their own skill sets in ways that sometimes we don't get the opportunity to do, because we can't have everybody seated at the same time because they're seated on.
Well, that actually is a really nice segue into the next section that we want to touch on, which is keeping sales teams motivated. Obviously, nothing is going to keep a sales team motivated more than closing deals, right? Or watching their peers close deals. So I think, if you see that there's an emergence out of inconsistencies in decision maker, or as you were talking about, sort of this fickle nature of the buyer right now, because they don't know if they're going to have a budget for what you're offering. But if you can see how the value of what you are selling is strong enough that it sort of pulls through, that certainly has to be a massive motivator for the rest of your team. But as it relates to the virtual coffees and the happy hours that you're doing, we're seeing the same thing, that everyone's slightly different than they were in March 2020 for whatever different reasons, whether it was they're taking on more work, they moved to a new company, they're unemployed, structural shifts in businesses, whole businesses going away. What does the modern buyer look like in this environment, or do we know exactly what the modern buyer looks like in this environment?
I don't know that we fully know yet, because there's some that I think are still behaving like the old ways of doing business, while they wait to see what the new, I don't like the term new normal, but what the next normal might be, if we even have one. I will tell you, I think the one thing that we're seeing is that the modern buyer, at least in the types of work that we do, is not a singular term. It's there's more than one. Buying for our business has become a team sport, because those who buy the human services of handling transactions with their customers are different than those who buy the digital services of things like automation and artificial intelligence and that sort of thing. The reason I think it's important to underscore that, though, is one of the first things customer or companies are asking themselves is, are we too overextended on people versus technology? Are we too overextended on one part of the world versus another? Are we overextended, on internal staff versus outsourced staff? And those are big questions that only a team of people who have across multiple functions can answer. So I think that for us, the modern buyer is now a plural.
Right. Now we're also needing to build new personas for that new buyer category that may not have existed just three months ago. One of the things that we see consistently is that a way to keep sales teams motivated is by giving them sort of predictable, structured sales processes and a consistency of workflow, and that by getting comfortable in that workflow, you gain confidence in your ability to sell the value proposition of your own business. You get confidence in selling against your competitors' value proposition, and even minor economic changes, not as dramatic as we've seen. So a lot of that structured sales process and that workflow involved things like getting on airplanes, going to dinners, follow-ups, research, bringing in sales engineering teams, building value proposition. For your business, and if you have any visibility into your peers, did you see that shift? And if it did, what is the plan to get back into consistency of workflows so that morale stays the same and confidence grows with sales teams? Again, nothing I think motivates better than just closing deals, but separate from that, how about the consistency of sales processes and workflow?
Yeah, for us, the core process is still the same. Hasn't shifted much. But as I mentioned, this is a relationship sale. For us, we're selling large, complex things that somebody's making a multi-million-dollar, multi-year investment in. It takes the process is long, it's arduous, but the key parts of the deal, where we win the deals, is when the buyers feel comfortable with us and they feel comfortable with the people and the technologies that are going to be supporting them, and they rely on seeing them for that. My wife asked me, why in the world do you think, don't you think you guys just spend too much time on airplanes anyway? She's a very talented artist. She'd rather sit in an art studio than sit at a dinner table with a prospect. But it's, the answer is they still value that, and that will come back eventually. Right now, I'm not being asked to go anywhere by a prospect or a current client because they're not ready to go anywhere. But they all say the same thing. We're itching to get back to that. And so I think what's going to happen is there's going to be an awkward awkwardness when we get back to it. You know, even as much as you know, what we use the term handshake so much. You know, we say we're doing a deal on a handshake, or we're going to shake hands when we get the deal done. How many people are shaking hands these days? You know, and it seems like a seemingly small thing, but it's like the carefully choreographed dance of selling is absolutely going to change. And so what we're doing is certainly finding ways to replace that. You know, I mentioned we replace a physical tour with a virtual tour, a physical coffee with a virtual coffee. But the importance of communication now cannot be overstated enough. And that's going to be very delicate as well, because in selling, you have that careful balance between I'm calling you too much and I'm not calling you enough to make sure that you don't forget me. And in a virtual environment, that becomes even more important.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And as you were talking through this, it made me wonder which is the purer form of sales. So everyone got so used to being able to get on an airplane at a moment's notice because the assumption was that being there meant everything. And we're now in an environment where companies, they have demand for services that companies like yours are offering. And the inclination of a salesperson, that adrenaline rush of, oh, I can gain an edge if I can just be there tomorrow, has gone away, because now we can say, let's get on a Zoom. But you're exactly right. It doesn't have the same foundational relationship as getting a handshake, which is not possible right now. But at the same time, if the communication through this medium that we're on right now can be perfected, does that become the purer form of establishing a relationship versus the I showed you I had respect for you because I flew there?
It's a little of both, I think. I'm going to parse your words a bit, because you said if we can perfect this, does it become the part of establishing a relationship? I think absolutely right.
Yep.
It does, and it would. But I will tell you, the face-to-face is not necessarily what establishes the relationship as much as what cements it. You know, being the senior leader of the sales organization, I don't go on every sales call.
Right.
I go on certain ones, and a lot of times I don't say much. I go in and I throw my role out, and I do a little introduction and an overview of Sykes, and reinforce our commitment to what the deal is. And that's that. And, you know, again, my wife would say, you flew all the way to Asia to do that.
To do a handshake. Yes, I did.
The customer, yeah, I've flown 30 hours to Singapore to have dinner. You know, the customer, though, comes back and says, that made a difference because I could feel the culture of the company, or I could feel the culture of the sales team or the accounts team that's going to support me. And, you know, is that going to change? Absolutely. Is it going to reduce? Absolutely. Are we ever going to replace that? You can't do it. You can't. And yes, buyers will be a little less expecting of that, but to underestimate the importance of the face-to-face interaction that takes place, you just can't.
Yeah.
It can change, but you can't take it away.
Can't take it away. That's great. Well, listen, I want to transition over into the insights and the analytics component of our discussion today. And I think this really gets to the meat of what salespeople are going to need to be successful, not only in the second half of 2020, but also going forward, even more so than in the definition of the data-driven last decade. You know, obviously the level of disruption that we're seeing right now in markets, social process, in social norms, sales processes, so on and so forth, has been unprecedented. I can't really think off the top of my head of another time where it's been this impactful. How much do you think sales leaders or even sales teams can rely on historical data or assumptions that you had in your minds and in your CRMs and in your documentations about buying behaviors and and other components of the sales process to develop accurate sales plans now. So in other words, does all the data that you have stacked up before mean anything? If so, how much, and where are you going to need to accommodate? Where do you feel like blind spots are happening?
Well, it certainly means something. If not relevant still in the COVID era, it'll mean something in the same way that libraries have history books, right? What existed before? What were you before? The bridge is going to be, how well does the sales team become a diagnostician, and how well does the sales team how much do they have at their disposal that can give them business intelligence, can give them understanding of what's going on, can help them formulate both a diagnosis and then translate that into here are the solutions that will meet the need. I used the term earlier. It's one of my favorite phrases, and my team, I know, gets sick of hearing it from me, but gone are the days of show up and throw up. Especially after COVID, because in my business, I could just assume everybody wanted to know about, what do you do in the Philippines, what do you do in Latin America, what do you do in Europe, and that was a sort of a standard flow in speech. And now we have to take a further step back and say, let's think together about what this has done to your world. Because I had a prospect who we were working on before, and I kind of use March 15th as the date, before March 15th, and their geographic strategy was clear. We knew what we wanted. They knew their balance of technology versus people and home agent versus non-home agent was very, very clear to us. I talked to him a month ago, and he said, remember everything I told you in March? Forget it. We now have a whole other set of needs. And so instead of saying, well, great, tell me what you need and I'll find a solution, it leads to having the conversation of saying, all right, let's talk about that. What's new? What changed? Why did it change? What's the impact of it going forward? And so needing to have a better discussion, a more meaningful discussion with them, is dependent upon knowing something different than you knew on March 15th. And what's even more important is, and this is why we value the business intelligence that we get through Turbine Labs, is what was relevant yesterday is not necessarily relevant this morning.
Right.
Things is so fast. So you've got to be able to have a mechanism to stay on top of that.
Well, and I think that's what we're seeing, is that acceleration of the expiration of the validity of data is happening even faster and faster. We got a question from a member of the audience. What historical data do you rely on? I think this is probably a two-part question, but the question was, what historical data do you rely on and find most valuable? I almost think we could ask that question in two ways: pre-March 15th and now post-March 15th.
Yeah, I think right now I'd stick with the post-March 15th.
Right, because here we are.
Yeah. I'm asking 4 questions. Now, for those that are not familiar with our services or not relevant to our services, they may seem a little off, but I'm asking 4 questions of all of the executives I talk to. And first is, who is serving, or first is, how are you serving your customers? Are you doing it through people, through storefronts, through technology, or through remote contact of some sort, call centers, what have you? What's the balance between people doing it and self-service or technology? The second question is, who is serving your customer? Is it your own people? Are you using a third party? Are you using other suppliers? The third question is then, where are you serving your customers? And again, that gets back to, are you doing it in storefronts? Are you doing it through contact centers? And if you're doing it through phone or contact center or chat, where are they? Are you overexposed in a particular geography? Are you overexposed in your own locations? Because we have customers that operate in the same geographies we do. They operate their internal centers, and they're going through a pain point right now because they're saying, half their location can't go back to work because they're limited to 50%. So that's the third question. And then the fourth is, when you use partners and suppliers, how confident are you in their ability to operate in a changed environment? Are they financially sound? Do they have the geographic diversity you need?
Mm-hmm.
And they support me through multi-channel or multi-technology opportunities. Those are the four that I'm asking, and I know they seem more relevant in my industry, but I think you could probably apply them almost anywhere.
But it almost sounds like, in addition to this, that you're framing, listen, for us to go forward and be successful, whether it's 1 quarter, 2 quarter, 3 quarters, that there's some set of new questions that we have to ask that we may, they were either there or they didn't have the same sort of urgency that they do now. And you bring up sort of the same thing that we're seeing in our own business as well as others that I talk to, is that this environment actually gives our sales teams the ability to ask new kinds of questions based on change that we've all gone through.
Absolutely right. And I think what I'm most excited about for my sales force is, we've kind of done 4 things to keep them motivated. One is hyper communication. We used to have a monthly sales huddle. Now we do it every 2 weeks. We check on each other. We've got a process of connecting your connections, which one of my direct reports started, one of our global sales leaders started, just getting them all on the phone at the same time. And we go round robin with like 2 or 3 people twice a week and say, who are you trying to connect to and how can we connect you with each other, that kind of thing. So I don't want to go too far off your question, but the other one is what you just said. They've now fallen out of their pattern. So collaborating together, communicating together, connecting our connections together, having new tools, which I mentioned before, having more business intelligence, which I mentioned before, all of those are things that set up sales teams to be better in a changed business environment. Because I think with all of us in sales get complacent. We have the same pitch, we have the same slides, we have the same my lucky socks that I wear or my pocket square that I wear for a particular customer. We all have these little routines, and our routines have been broken. And in my mind, that's a good thing because it forces us to develop our better, teach them better, apply new skills, get them doing things that they haven't done before, and get them out of things that we've been trying to get them out of for a while.
Well, so that's a great segue into the get people out of things. We look at, sort of the avoidable errors, right, as something that a sales organization should always be looking at. And this was something that we were thinking about as the economy is booming. And you said, like we get into our norms and everything was sort of quickly taken from us. And I mainly want to, from your chair, describe a couple of these avoidable errors that we talk about, and then say, okay, listen, as you move forward, what is your plan to tackle these? So, when you think about an error of ignorance, right? We all walk into sales situations where the salesperson or the team failed to uncover a piece of information that should have known. That morning there was a merger announced, or that morning there was a reduction in force announced. Could you imagine having to be on a sales appointment on March 15th, right? Where the news is there, but it was not brought in by a salesperson because they decided not to do the research beforehand. Or an error of application where the salesperson knew that they failed to apply the information, the salesperson knew the information, they had it with them, but they didn't figure out a way to weave in that information in such a way that could have positively impacted the outcome. And then the final one is sort of an error of ineptitude, or even an error of enablement, where the organization had access to knowledge or intelligence or insights that could have impacted the outcome, but for some reason that intelligence didn't make it to sales leadership and then to the ground sales people to positively impact the opportunity. Which one do you feel like is the most appropriate to tackle from your point of view? And which one do you feel like you can, could make the biggest impact on accelerating deals closing if it was improved?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is error of ignorance, and I use that not in terms of the salesperson is ignorant, but we are ignorant of information or needs that we have to have. It's absolutely the most important one to me, because to me that's either I didn't have enough knowledge going into a meeting or a sales call, or I don't know how to apply it, or I'm not a diagnostician. I'm a speaker. I'm not, I talk to somebody rather than listen to them first and then talk with them. I mean, that to me is the error of ignorance. That is probably the single biggest reason that once you get a sales call, it falls flat. Then you go down to it leads to the error of application, right? And so therefore, I think to the second part of your question, that's the easiest one to fix, because if I can get them understanding the buyer better, more information, more knowledge, more perception, more diagnostics of what they need, more triaging, then I'm gonna skip both of those. Ineptitude is, unfortunately, sometimes we just screw up in a sales process.
Yeah.
And we all probably have salespeople or we used to have salespeople that did it a lot. But I think those first two are the ones that sort of go hand in hand and are the easiest ones and most critical ones to have solutions for.
Yeah. Well, Jim, before we part ways today, and I greatly appreciate your time, are you optimistic for the next 2 quarters, the next 2 years? How do you, what is the viewpoint that you discuss with your sales team each week?
I think what we talk about each week is more, or in the biweekly is more. We actually use that less to talk to them and more to listen to them. What we do is we usually have a couple of pieces of knowledge sharing or guest speakers from within our company or our partners, and then we spend an hour just going round robin around the sales team to see how are they doing, what are they feeling, what are the needs. We usually throw a topic out. So what I am hearing optimism from them. I think they're still continuing to have people return their phone calls. They're still continuing to have needs explained to them. So yeah, they're optimistic. The next 2 quarters, we're selling in our business.
Yeah, you got a long sales cycle in your business, right?
So I'm selling for 2021 right now. And yeah, we're starting to hear people ask for new things. They're asking for a different set of our products. We have a significant strength in a work at home agent capability, which now everybody wants to talk to us about. The automation capabilities that we have, everybody wants to talk about. So
right.
For our company and for my industry, I'm optimistic, because whether it's my company or my competitors, when the economy is rough, when there's uncertainty, when companies are feeling like they're at a bit of a disadvantage, they like us, because we provide scalability, we provide flexibility, we provide a ready resource, and we provide quality for them and the customers as an industry. Of course, I'd like we do it best, but as an industry, all of us do it. So yeah, I'm very optimistic about that. The next couple of years, is the economy going to come roaring back? I have CNBC on in my office. Somebody says it's a V, somebody says it's a W. Jim Cramer will tell you it's going to come roaring back. We don't know, but I think the good news is this is not a recession that was a demand side recession. It was a supply side recession. I'm not an economist. I don't even pretend to play one on TV, but the fact that so many people are out of work is going to slow us down for a while, and people are going to be cautious going back. So am I optimistic? I'm always optimistic. Do I think it's going to come flying back? Are we seeing that? Our customers aren't telling us that.
Good. Well, listen, before we part ways, I want to give the audience an opportunity to take advantage of some sales team resources offered at Turbine Labs. First of all, you can go to our homepage and you can subscribe to our daily briefing, Emerging from the Pandemic. Jim, we've published now 86 editions of this, and the feedback that we get from our audience is that this is where they go first thing in the morning to get their information about COVID-19, the economic conditions, as well as really unique content and how businesses and executive teams are moving forward. That's available free on our website. We also, in the last month, launched a brand new news site called The Neutral at www.theneutral.com. It's a great place to get conversation starters. We use our platform to take issues and news that's happening through the day, and then snippets of articles from opposing perspectives, so that even if you've got somebody across the table or Zoom from you, as it were, that doesn't agree with you, you can have both perspectives. And then we will also be launching, which will inform everyone around, a sales Jetstream newsletter, which takes our sales enablement platform and then brings it into a practical application for sales leaders. But Jim Farnsworth, SVP of Sykes, greatly appreciate your time today. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone on the next Turbine Labs webinar series. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone.
Thanks, Lee.